Okay, welcome. Today we're going to be discussing the series of videos you watched regarding the bell founding or making of the bronze church bell that we saw in the Archeometalurgy video series. So we'll start discussing that now, and some important observations I thought I made as I first watched these, and I was hoping you would make as well. All right. So first thing. I found it kind of interesting that this is what he started with, and basically what you can kind of see is you can kind of see how just from the get-go you have a very sort of primitive structure with the bell shape. That this piece of wood is sort of narrow at this end and then widens out at one end, and he's kind of repeating that with the rope here. When I first started making these, I wasn't entirely certain why he put the rope on. But then in the later videos, I thought it was just a really clever idea, because what you could do is after you've made the mold, you could take the rope out, and then that would enable you to get the piece of wood out, which was really important. Now, another thing that I hope you notice, you probably noticed this by the end, but this thing is free to rotate. Probably had to put some sort of lubricant there to give it some friction so it was easy to rotate. But that turns out to be another really important aspect to this that we see when we go on to this next video. And this was just sort of the simple clay core, and you can see that I also think part of the reason the rope is used is that it gives the clay probably sticks to the rope a little bit better when it's wet than what we saw in the or than what we would have seen if we just put it straight to the wood. But you'll notice that this thing is pretty symmetrical. And that was the whole point of the turning. When you turn something like that, and you sort of you wear it evenly as it's turning, it will tend to make it symmetrical. This is what we'd call just a hand lathe. We have powered lathes today that do this, but you can make really circularly symmetrical things using this sort of technology. And we saw that in the making of this bell and of the clay core at this point. I eventually added more clay, kind of with the intent of, again, making it a little bit more bell-shaped. So, again, you can kind of see it's narrowing down at the top and widening out at the end, so becoming a bit more like a bell. And then using tools to actually scrape it down, and as it's spinning, scrape it down and get it into the precise shape that he wants. Okay, so that's kind of what was going on in the second video there, where he's getting the core into just the right shape before he starts to make the model. And the model was not entirely clear what this was. Maybe you could tell, but yeah, the model was made of this yellowish and greenish wax. And so basically what he's doing at first is just sticking these hunks of wax and sticking them to the mold. And then slowly, as the procedure goes on, he's adding more wax, he's grinding some wax away, he's spinning it again, using his tools to make it perfectly symmetrical, and you can definitely see it's slowly starting to take on the shape of a bell. Now the one main thing is it's not going to have the top of the bell, and we saw that this needed to be addressed towards the end. And you can see the gaps that the ropes had left, and so once he peeled the rope off and unwound it, then it was easy to get the lathe core out. And at this point, he's got the structure of the bell, the symmetrical part of the bell, kind of made the way he wants, but he's still got to add the top of the bell, so he does that with more wax. And you can kind of tell that this wax is not super uniform. It's all different colors, all that kind of stuff. But the structure of the bell looks pretty good. The model of the bell looks pretty good. And so once he added the top on, you can see, yep, now this bell's got a very sturdy top to it. I mean, this right now it's just wax, so it wouldn't be particularly sturdy. but we can definitely see it's got a very distinct bell shape. It's got a place to anchor it, and it looks like the model itself is pretty much done. Now, as to what comes next, the idea is that you cover this with more clay. And what you ultimately want, the reason you're covering it with more clay, is what you ultimately want is you want basically just a solid piece of clay with a gap in the middle, with a hollow gap in the middle. That's the shape of a bell that you can then pour your metal into, your molten metal into, and let it harden into the shape of a bell. So that's why they're covering this model with wax again. Because, as we know, when you heat up the wax melts, and we'll take a look at that step. Now, I thought this was kind of clever. I mean, it's definitely needed, but I was hoping you would catch the significance of this stick, because what's going on as he's making this outer layer of the mold, he wants to make sure he has an access point that he can not only probably, I don't know if he needs it to get the wax out so much, but he definitely is going to need it to get the molten bronze in. So that's the purpose that this stick is serving. It's eventually going to be pulled out, and you're going to be left with a hole there. But that's kind of the purpose we're seeing here. So then we've got you can see the stick, the stick for the hole. Actually, I think this is probably the main hole. I think with this one, what you want here is you want a second hole so that it can push air out of it. So I think that was probably what the stick was for, and I think they probably left the larger hole itself. But either way, I was hoping you'd catch that you need to do this in order to get the wax out and then be able to get the molten metal in. Now, when you heat it up like this, it's going to have two different purposes. One, it's going to harden the clay mold and make it's probably not going to be perfectly like a ceramic, but it will be a little bit harder, a little bit more durable. You can even see that when they were breaking it open, they had to kind of chisel it away instead of just peeling the mud away. So that's going to make it a little easier to remove. And then this is also going to melt the wax out or burn the wax away. So you're going to have this gap in the middle that's just empty that was, where the model used to be. So that gap is going to be completely bell-shaped. And then from there, what you're going to do is you're going to bury it. Now, as to why they bury it, I think there are a couple of reasons. One, if where you need to pour the metal is on the ground, that's probably really helpful. Probably that metal is heavy. It's hard to lift it up high and, pour it up on something if it was sitting on a table. But the other thing we'll see, and we'll talk about this more, you really want to have this mold be well supported because you don't want it to crack or get deformed as you pour the metal in. So burying it in dirt can really help do that. And then finally, we saw them heat up the metal. We're wondering if you were able to catch what this metal was. This metal is bronze. It's a mixture of copper and tin that's then melted together. Bronze was was one of the most widely used metals before iron, and even after iron, because bronze could be cast in this way long before iron could. The melting temperature of bronze is significantly less than that of iron, so you can get into this liquid form and pour it into a mold. That process is what we call casting. Iron would have to be forged, which means you would heat it up. The metal would get softer, kind of more like clay, and then you could use metal tools to shape it into the shape you wanted. So if you've ever seen a blacksmith, hitting a glowing piece of iron on an anvil, that's what they're doing. They're forging that instead of casting it. Eventually, iron did become castable and ultimately refined it to a process that could make the best kind of iron, which we'll talk about. We'll talk about a bit later, but this is the process of casting. And then finally, we have the the results. Now you'll notice that this bell is kind of the last thing we saw, but it's it's gonna have to be polished up. You're gonna have to scrape this stuff off, whether it's dirt or just little pieces of bronze that kind of filled in little gaps in the mold. You're gonna have to polish this, smooth it up, make it nice, make it good to look at. But basically, what we have is now a bronze bell. So hope that process was interesting. I hope you enjoyed the process of figuring that out. And if there was anything you couldn't figure out, I hope this video was helpful in sort of cluing you into what was going on there. Okay? So thank you for tuning in to this one. Take care, and I will see you next time.